Welcome to College Football Roundtable, your source for college football coverage, including major storylines,
playoffs,
can't miss game previews, and picks each week. Join your hosts, Dan, Rob, and Jordan at the Roundtable for a show unlike anything else. As for Football presents the College Football Roundtable.
All right, let's get started. Hey, so welcome back, everybody. It's week 7. The madness continues. Michael Penix Jr. had his Heisman moments as the Huskies beat the Ducks, and the Purple Rain still continues to play in Husky Stadium. Georgia continues to play with their food, and the Saturday slate turned out to be a heck of a lot better than it was predicted earlier. I think we have a good idea who's going to be standing tall and who's going to be the first tier to hit their bowl eligibility this week. Week 7 started with 14 undefeated teams, and we're now down to 11. This season has been wild so far. And guess what? We got games on Tuesday again. What's up, Trash Talkers? Welcome back to the College Football Roundtable, or if you prefer, we'd like to call it Ring Knocker Radio. And you can always say 2 O's and an NCO. I'm Rob, the Angry Colonel. I'm also the playground legend today, coming out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. We got Dano Ikebesa calling to you from coastal Connecticut, and we got Trigger Joe coming from the home of the Big House. So I started this weekend, watched the Army game, listened to the Navy game as they slipped into a victory in the second half, which I still can't believe. And then I was listening to the home call when Washington beat Oregon. I tell you what, like if you have satellite radio or the Varsity app, dip into the team that looks like they're going to win and listen to like the last 2 minutes of the game. Like, even if you're not a fan of that team, it will give you an emotional lift because the Washington call was bedlam. Like, those guys were screaming in the booth. I'm sure that their sound guys' ears were bleeding as loud as they were making it. But then, of course, I checked in on the Pac-12 nightcaps, both on Friday and on Saturday night.
Wow.
I went to bed when CU was up 21-0, woke up the next day, and I was like, what the actual F happened? They came apart at the seams. And then, of course, in the battle of Heisman-level quarterbacks, I think Sam Hartman got the better end of the deal in the USC game. But I'll pause there, kick it over to Joe. What did you end up watching this weekend?
Yeah, it started with Colorado and Stanford Friday night. But Saturday, I started out watching the Wolverines start very slow in the rain, and it was cold up here. And then they woke up in the second quarter and dismantled Indiana 51-7. Then 3:30, watched one of the best games of the season, Oregon and Washington. It was a beautiful thing to watch Michael Penix in a duel with 29-year-old Bo Nix and come out on top. I'm going to make fun of that forever. Then to cap off the evening between watching UFC and football, I watched Notre Dame truck house Southern Cal in a win I did not see going that way. So ended up being a good Saturday for football.
Yeah, I thought that I still think the USC game, Notre Dame, was supposed to be a lot closer. And obviously that's why they play the games, folks. Dano, what did you end up watching?
So Army had the squirrely 3:30 kickoff, which means that I missed all of the early games driving up there in the freaking rain. Got rained again. Watch the team fumble, and then, they're just not executing. And now they got a bunch of bad injuries. Honestly, the Army team's in crisis right now. Got a game at LSU on the horizon, and I'm afraid, as Army fans, we're in for a tough stretch. Like, I think the coaching staff can get it turned around at some point in the next couple of weeks, but that was ugly. And then by the time I got home, look, Army season is shot, and the last thing I wanted to do was think about more football. Split a bottle of wine with my wife, had dinner, went on with my life. What can you do?
Yeah. Well, speaking of moving on with your life, maybe you can buy some llamas and get that farm discount.
Alpaca farm going.
Yeah, get your alpaca farm going. So we have a sponsor here at As Football. It's BuyerBarn.com. Buyer Barn was co-founded by class of 1997 graduate Dan Robinson. Dan ran a traditional farm co-op and realized that there was a much better way to bring farm sales and auctions into the 21st century. He and his co-founder Dinu took their experience in IT management and developed and built the world's first farm-to-farm online sales and auction platform. Buyer Barn provides reduced health issues through cutting down on animal owner contact, reduce animal fraud by a buyer and rater selling system, fully integrated auction platform with secure payments, convenience to buy and sell in your own time at better market pricing because you get a much wider audience. Think of it eBay versus a yard sale. Buyer Barn is dedicated to helping small farmers in America and is providing a special discount to military veterans who want to assist them in the small family farm revolution. Go to buyerbarn.com or just click on the tab at the As for Football website, and it'll take you straight to the page, and then you can go find anything but a horse at buyerbarn.com. Dano, you want to take the service academies?
Yeah, man. As we said, Army really struggled this week. They got shut out at home against Troy, 19-0. The first home shutout in 20 years. Like, they had not been shut out at home since the depth of the bad old days. And this Army team looks as bad right now under Coach Monken as they ever have. By the end of halftime this weekend, we were down to a plebe center, plebe running back, plebe wide receiver, plebe quarterback. And it's just not, that is not the plan, especially against a defense as good as Troy's. And add in the fact that it was raining sideways and 45 degrees. And it was just like, it was so miserable out there. And, the plebe wide receiver and quarterback are out there because of injuries, but that running back, he's just the best guy on the team. The center, he's the best center on the team. So it just sort of tells you where we are. And like we said, these guys are not about to put it together and somehow push LSU this weekend. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. Hopefully we can get turned around at some point, see some consistent improvement heading into the Navy game. But so far, like, the Army team, for better or worse, has been regressing in stages over the course of this season. And speaking of teams that are also struggling, Navy somehow beat Charlotte this weekend in what has got to be one of the ugliest games in college football history. This game started with 12 straight punts, 12. Nothing but punts in the first half. Navy finally hit a pass on freaking 3rd and 14 that went for a touchdown with their first possession of the third quarter. Then fullback Alex Teka broke off a 62-yard run at the start of the fourth quarter. That was all of the scoring. The Mids win 14-0. And look, I don't know how many Navy fans listen to this show. I have it on good authority. That's really not that many. That team, the Mids, they have a good defense. Maybe not quite as good as they were last year, but they're still pretty good. However, that offense, they're not very good. They put up 173 yards rushing on 4.3 yards a carry against Charlotte, who's 1-5. For all of Army's problems, as bad as much as we just dumped on the Black Knights, they actually did better than that against Troy in the rain. So that's an alarming area of concern if you're a Navy fan. Meanwhile, Air Force, looming on the horizon, came from behind to beat Wyoming 34-17. The Zoomies ran for 356 freaking yards on 7 yards per carry, but more impressively, they held the Cowboys to just 6 points in the second half, and they won despite fumbling twice in the first half and letting Wyoming capitalize both times. So I just can't say enough. Air Force now I think is ranked number 22. That team is really, really good. They're at Navy this weekend, and despite the massive advantage that the home team usually holds in this series, fully expecting another runaway Zoomie victory. If this one's not as bad as the one that got, what's his name, that offensive coordinator fired, I'll be very surprised because I'm expecting Air Force to lay the whooping this weekend. FCS Academies, Coast Guard had a bye week this week. They take on Norwich at 1:30 this weekend. They're now 3-3, seem to play better at home than they do on the road, so we'll see how they do. Meanwhile, Merchant Marine Academy beat MIT 28-14. They're now 5-1, very much in control of their own destiny. Fullback Cesar Gonzalez ran 27 times for 132 yards and 3 touchdowns. They take on Worcester Polytech at Kings Point this weekend, starting at noon. Fully expect they'll be 6-1. Rob's got a note in here. If you're a fan of these FCS academies, they usually stream their games online. Just go to the team website and hits the watch button and enjoy the game, which, who knows, maybe I'll do that.
All right, Joe, how about top 10 for this week?
Yeah, Georgia stays at number 1 after a 37-20 win over Vandy. Weak sauce. Okay, they were only up 10, got a garbage touchdown late. That game was actually closer than the score indicates. Michigan rolls on Indiana 51-7. They stay at 2. Ohio State, no spoiler makers here, 41-7 at Purdue. FSU destroyed the Cuse 41-3, so they stay at number 4. Washington finally cracks the top 5 after a magical 36-33 win over the Ducks. Oklahoma dropped down a spot on their week off to 6. And Penn State in the first time in college football history, won 63-0 and dropped one spot from 6 to 7.
That's
So,
nuts. How do you
Yeah,
do
how does
that?
that work? How does
I
that
just
work?
think what Washington did was so, was so paramount to like where the rankings are going to end up in the top 5 that, I mean, Penn State's got every chance to get it back this weekend.
Sure.
So if they win this weekend, they'll be right back in there. Texas was, a slight move in their off weeks, number 8. The Ducks, Oregon, dropped to number 9 after, just only dropping one spot. That's how close that game was with Washington. And then North Carolina is the new face in the top 10 as the Tar Heels handle Miami 41-31. Good for you, North Carolina. They're undefeated.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So other issues in the top 25 we'll hit. Top 25 losses this week. There's 34 so far this season. We're just at week 8. So I think we're on pace to break the record of what we had a couple years ago. I think it was 68 top 25 losses. And again, a lot of this is not ranked on ranked matchups. That's why going into this weekend, it was kind of like, who cares? Some of these games are going to be good. I think everybody had Oregon and Washington circled on their calendar. But other than that, it was kind of like, who really cares? As mentioned, Oregon lost a close one to Washington, and there's some coaching stuff in there. We'll dive into that a little bit later. USC drops a big one to Notre Dame. Sam Hartman looked way better of the 2 Heisman candidate quarterbacks in that game. But seeing that Sam Hartman had such a terrible game last week against Louisville, he needed to bounce back, and so he did, which shows a lot of character, at least as far as him as a player in preparation for the team. Drake May stepped up this week, took care of the University of Miami, and now they have dropped 2 in a row. They had a chance, like this could have been their first contentious game for the University of Miami, barring taking a knee, which is still just unbelievable to me that happened last week. Louisville got smacked around by Pittsburgh, 38-21. Who saw that coming?
Holy cow. What an upset. Yeah. I did not see that one in the highlights.
Louisville.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah, like Louisville was in the driver's seat of the ACC, and then they just fell off the wagon. Like they were looking to be like showdown with Florida State, and I think that was probably going to be the best game of the season. Not so much anymore. UCLA got beat down by Oregon State. They lost 36-24, and this one is another one that came out of left field. How did the Arizona Wildcats come out of nowhere and stomp Washington State Cougars 44-6? Unranked team beating a ranked number 19 team, drubbing. Kansas State lost their offensive production, and they dropped down to Oklahoma State 39-32, and then Mizzou took out number 24 Kentucky. That's a revolving door in that number 23 and number 20, 23 through 25. That's just going to be a revolving door on who plays better that weekend. The Wildcats lost 38-21, and I guess the note says it automatically comes with a loss if you hit number 24. But all that being said, it is now time to move to Joe's Blue Falcon of the Week. So who is on the slate of infamy this week, my friend?
I usually don't do this, and I wouldn't do it to a backup or a kicker or a freshman or anything like that. But it's going to a player, not a coach. So Caleb Williams, turn your volume up because you need to hear this. I'm sure it was a lot of fun beating up on Stanford and Arizona State and Colorado. I know what I said, and I'm not going to say their name right until they start playing some defense. But when the chips were down, Heisman, and you had a chance to set your school apart and put the Trojans in a very good spot to make the playoffs, you choked and threw 3 interceptions. You're probably making as much money off NIL deals as a lot of pro quarterbacks, and I think it might have got to your head. I've said it since last season. I think you're a little bit overrated, and I still stand by that because USC goes where you lead them, and this week you led them into a dumpster fire. So you, sir, are the Blue Falcon of the Week. Come collect your T-shirt.
Yeah, that was pretty rough, and he threw those 3 picks in the first half, and that was like, that set Notre Dame up for success. I mean, I think one was almost a pick 6, and they think there was 2 that basically flipped the field, and Notre Dame had a very short field to go. So that was insane. But moving on to the topic this week, and I say this is like, who's the never let you down team? Like, who's the team that just can't get right? You watch these guys year after year, hoping that they're going to get over the hump, hoping they're going to get to, in the old days, a New Year's Six Bowl. Now it's in the playoff, and every time you turn around, like it's 5-star lock that they're going to drop one game. And I said this a couple weeks ago when Oregon beat Colorado. I was like, these guys are going to drop one before week 13. It's usually week 13. They usually lose to Oregon State, but this time they snuck up on themselves and shot themselves in the foot against Washington for two reasons. One, coach was super, super aggressive, and like hats off to him when you're aggressive. But when there's basically no time on the clock in the first half, you bring out the field goal team and you kick the field goal. Like, why? Because those 3 points can make the difference. Those 3 points that they left on the field in the first half came back and bit them in the butt in the second half, because then they would have been playing for the win. Now, the kicker may or may not have missed, but at least you had a chance at overtime and an opportunity to win the game without, watching a ball go wide right or wide left. I think it was wide left this time. Either way, I've been saying this for years. If you've known me, I watch a lot of college football, and Oregon never seems to let me down. They will run the table, and then they run into, like, even when they had a Heisman Trophy candidate in the first playoff, what happened to Marcus Mariota when they took on Ohio State?
The Buckeyes paid my rent. That's what happened.
That's awesome.
So obviously you put some money on that game. Well,
you knew that was coming. Anybody that knew that Ohio State team knew Oregon was running into a road grader. They didn't know it, but us Midwestern Big Ten fans were like, "There's no way, because I'm bringing that West Coast nonsense out here. You're gonna get smashed."
Yeah. Well, and again, I can remember even years ago. It's like there was like 2012 or 2013 when they had to play them in the Rose Bowl, and it was like, oh, Oregon, like you obviously don't watch football, because Oregon does not do well after week 10. So I'm surprised. The one thing that I will say, I'm surprised that they lost this early, because I seriously thought they were going to take the head-to-head matchup against Washington and move on. But I will pass it over to Dano. Who is the team that has always let you down?
I'm not totally sure that I understood the assignment here. I kind of went the other way with it. I said LSU because they're perennially the second best team in the SEC West, except for those occasional years when they're the best team in football, but that's been kind of rare. But they always have like these next level, unbelievable freaking players, and yet somehow you're looking at this team like, why are you not winning your division? Why are you not even winning the conference championship? Like, what is going on here? And of course, you guys know I have a soft spot for LSU because they recruited me a little bit, but and the current team is a little off theme with their rep. Like, they're not playing the kind of ball that you would think that they're supposed to play, but they're totally on theme for this, because I don't think that this LSU team is remotely as good as advertised, especially compared to the hype. And then my other one would be Oklahoma, because it seems like the hype for Oklahoma is just next level every year. And I enjoy watching Oklahoma, but and they're good this year too, but I don't for one instant think that they're going to like make it to the national championship game or anything, even though from where we are right now, they have every reason to believe that they could.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a Big 12 fan, like, you're probably hanging your shingle on Oklahoma. I mean, like,
they're the best team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they've even got a defense, which is amazing.
That's what makes this team a little scary, because I've said that before. Like, if Oklahoma played defense, could you imagine that? My goodness, they'd be freaky scary, because their offense can hang 50.
Yeah.
Easy
for half the games of the season.
But I know I'm not the only one who's just waiting for this Oklahoma team to stumble. I mean, were they ranked to start the season? Maybe they were in the 20s. It seems even after they beat Texas, it still seems like people were kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, Oklahoma's good, man, and I think what it is like when you have an embarrassment of riches, like, so you have Baker Mayfield and then Kyler Murray back to back, two great seasons, and then you kind of have a lull, and there's like, well, who's a quarterback at OU? I don't know, some guy,
Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, well, think about it. Like, it was, you had Jalen Hurts that came over, and then the other part of it is like the guy that was supposed to be the cornerstone of the Oklahoma defense is now in USC throwing picks at freaking Notre Dame, because Lincoln Riley packed his bags and head across the country. So it's like, is it a rebuilding year for Oklahoma? I don't know. And then what's next year going to look like when they end up in that SEC schedule, man? Like you cannot play Pac-12 or Big 12 football in the SEC and expect to win, because
LSU's trying to do that right now, and it ain't exactly going their way.
Yeah. Joe, how about you?
Oh, I got to go Notre Dame on this one. Every year they play 2 to 3 tough games, and they usually lose 2 to 3 of them. This year they already dropped to Ohio State. No shame in that. But Louisville, they should have won that game. Now, I find it a little ironic that we talked about them beating USC before, so they did bounce back. But you already got 2 losses. So I think that they're perennially overrated, and it's because of those golden helmets. And I just don't see it. I'm like, unless you join a conference and put up that kind of schedule, I don't want to see. I don't want to hear about how great Notre Dame is compared to the top teams in the country, because every year they disappoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Notre Dame is kind of like Colorado, like in the early 90s, because those two were like the teams that were battling it out. You had Colorado, you had Rocket Ismail, you had Quadri Ismail at Syracuse, you had all these like super, super talented teams. And like now there is like a period of like, okay, just quiet, and then Monty Teo shows up and has his catfish incident. And that was like, that's the most news that Notre Dame has had recently, was that versus, the play on the field. And now, they're praising, the grad transfer of Sam Hartman, hoping that he's going to be able to bring them to the promised land, to use the allegorical statement. But the problem is they've dropped 2. So what does Notre Dame look like for the rest of the season? Are they just playing season spoiler for everybody else on the rest of their, on their schedule, or do they legitimately have a chance? Because I don't think what we've seen with the playoff committee, that they're going to be willing to let a 10-2 team, you know what I mean? A team with 2 losses is not getting into the playoff.
Well, when you have 3 statement games and you lose 2 of them, you're kind of shot. And I mean, I hate it for them. I wish it was like the NFL where you can, come in with 3 losses and win the whole thing. But you just can't in college football. You can't afford to drop 2 of your biggest 3 games.
Yeah, you can't.
Like Michigan lost to Penn State and Ohio State. Their season's done.
Yeah. And I think that's really where it becomes tricky, because college football has a lot more desire for perfection. And, and you always hear when the commentators talk, well, they got to pass the eye test. They got to pass the eye test. Well, if you're losing 2 teams that you should handily beat, like, you failed the eye test, period. Doesn't matter.
My eye test is looking at the scoreboard when there's zeros on the clock. So if you don't pass that one, it doesn't really matter. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And then it's the same thing. It's the same thing with like how after this week, we are halfway through the season, can, Caleb Williams win the Heisman after throwing 3 picks in a pivotal game, right? Shouldn't happen. But the other part of it is look at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders should, like, if we throw records out the window, Shedeur Sanders is the most efficient quarterback in college football as far as throwing passes and scoring touchdowns. However, when you look on the backside of that, he's also got, 3 losses and more sacks than anyone else in college football. But if we're just basing it off of his performance in yards and touchdowns, he's the best quarterback in college football. However, he's not on the best team. And so, complimentary football is the way to go. But I really think that, the teams that were mentioned here are all kind of those teams that I think, like, if we really sat back and we're honest with ourselves, is like, yeah, they're good. Like make no mistake, I don't want to go play Oklahoma if I'm, Tulane, or if I'm North Texas. Like, I don't want that as an out-of-conference game. I know that I'm going to make some money off of it, but I definitely don't want to take the risk and get my players beat up playing teams like that. But I also think that, upsets happen. I mean, if you don't believe so, like, look at how close Wyoming and App State's games have been this season. Like, they have been razor's edge close. And if you have been watching those 2 teams, it literally is like, whoever gets the ball last is going to win it. But all that being said, hey, look, everybody always has that one team that's going to let them down. Here's somebody that won't let you down, Craig Oxane. I will pass it over to Dan.
That's beautiful. So we got a sponsor here at As for Football, and it's Craig Oxane, the Vice President of Residential Lending for Draper and Kramer in Chicago. Craig is a member of the West Point class of 1994, licensed to lend in all 50 states, but based out of Chicago. Friends, Craig is one of the biggest VA lenders in the country. He's going to offer you super competitive rates, give you the best deal that he possibly can. And I don't know if you guys have bought a house, but the mortgage process is super freaking confusing. Interest rates are moving all over the place, and now is not the time to try to deal with some clown who really just wants to make a buck off you, right? Deal with somebody who actually cares, who's a real person that you can establish an actual connection with, not a call center, not some random big box bank minus website. And, friends, this is how the West Point Network functions. Craig is helping us stay in business here at As for Football, and we're helping you get the best deal on a mortgage that we can by trying to introduce you to a person that you can trust. Plus, Craig does not charge lenders fees for veterans. That's a savings of $1,300. Get that money. Go save yourself $1,300. Craig Oxane, Vice President of Residential Lending. Check it out. His link is on our website. You go to asforfootball.com, click the little link, fill out a questionnaire. You'll be talking to Craig in a couple of hours. It could not be easier, and we guarantee that you will have a good experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Dano. Hey, so let's move on to games of the week. If you can believe it, we are in the second week in a row of Tuesday night college football. Get out of town. All right, so Tuesday night, October 17th, starts off with a 7 o'clock kick. You at Middle Tennessee at Liberty. Those are both kind of meh teams, but I'm sure that'll be an exciting game because, usually when you have two not so great contests, they usually end up having a pretty good one when they're playing each other. You got Western Kentucky at Jacksonville State. That should be good. Jacksonville State just moved up from FCS to FBS, and they're a pretty solid team. They've been doing pretty well this year. I think that will be a good game. Western Kentucky with their cool Hilltopper helmets. If they go with the shiny gold ones, those are always pretty good underneath the lights. And then you end the week with Southern Miss at South Alabama. South Alabama is not doing so good. Southern Miss, they're okay team. That should be a good capper for Tuesday night. Wednesday, you got FIU at Sam Houston, New Mexico State, and UTEP. FIU kicks at 7 o'clock, and UTEP kicks at 9 p.m. at 2100 for those of you that speak military. On Thursday, October the 19th, you got Rice at Tulsa, and then you got James Madison and Marshall. That should be a good game. Marshall's always sneakily loaded and ready to take down an undefeated team. I don't know if it's going to happen against James Madison. They're looking pretty good this season. I think James Madison and Jackson State are two great teams that are not going to get postseason nods just because of their transition into FBS, which is unfortunate. Hopefully,
bogus, man. They're the best team in the Sun Belt.
Yeah, for both of those teams, if opportunity presents itself, they need to have a bowl game or just set up a bowl game where James Madison plays, Jackson State. I would watch that game easy because I think those two teams are both great. I only got one game on Friday night. It's on ESPN2. You got SMU at Temple kicking at 7 p.m. All right, so moving on into the Saturday matchups. These are kind of crazy, so they're kind of wonked out. So I started with the two late games that are coming on. You got Duke and Florida State. Those are both either ABC or ACC network, depending on where you are regionally. So you got number 17 Duke. I don't think Riley Leonard will be starting against Florida State, which is bad for Duke. They won this past week, but I don't know if they'll be able to carry that in there without their starting QB. Clemson at Miami. This may be a chance for Clemson to get a little bit of redemption and play season spoiler. It would have been a lot more interesting game 2 weeks ago, but seeing that Miami has dropped 2, I think Miami's just trying to hold on to their number 25 spot, and that'll be about the extent of it. Air Force and Navy kicks at noon on CBS and Paramount Plus if you have it. Believe it or not, it makes me scratch my head. Of course, that's a hard lean for Air Force right now because I think Air Force, sadly, is the best of the 3 Service Academy teams in college football right now. Doesn't mean upsets don't happen, but definitely one that will
That'd be a whale of an upset, let me tell you.
I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be surprised to see Navy cover, though. They're
Oh, my goodness.
Points.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's put a pin in that and come back to it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about that later. So you've got the State Penn and Ohio State University kicking at noon. I think that'll be a much better game. Usually that game goes Penn State's way when they're playing at Happy Valley. But if they're playing at the shoe, advantage Ohio State. That's usually one of those games where the advantage goes to the home team. And that one's always a good one. You've got UCF at Oklahoma. I feel bad for UCF. We'll see if they're a contender or pretender when they're taking on Oklahoma. If they can keep it close, then they might have a chance. The informal 2017 champions are taking on the rising Oklahoma University. You got Oklahoma State and West Virginia. We'll see if they can bounce back. West Virginia is quietly good. I mean, they're 4-2 this season. They lost a close one last week to Houston. On the last play of the game, it was a tipped Hail Mary with the guy caught. It could have went either way.
Oh, I saw that one. That was amazing.
It was a legit 50-50 ball. But you got Oklahoma State and West Virginia. That'll be a good game. That kicks at 3:30 on ESPN. You got Washington State and Oregon. Can Oregon bounce back after losing a close one? Washington State has got to be a little bit frustrated after that beating that they took from Arizona. this sets up well for a trap game, to be honest, just because you've got one team that's licking their wounds because of a tough loss. The other team is emotionally drained because they had a close loss. So this is in that window of shenanigans that could potentially happen. You've got UCF at UConn. Dano, we put that one on there because you're the UConn fan. But
yeah, we're going to talk about that one too. Listen, that's an interesting. We'll save it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting matchup, just given the way that these teams have been playing all season. You got Tennessee and Alabama. We are not going to see what we saw last year in the Tennessee-Alabama game. I don't know if it's going to be that close. Is Bama going to Bama, or is Tennessee going to actually play some ball? I mean, they've been like, if the only roller coaster that's worse than the emotional roller coaster at Tennessee is the broken one at Carowinds that we saw a couple weeks ago in the news. So that one's going to be interesting. Tennessee and Alabama. Can we get can lightning strike twice in Tuscaloosa? We shall see. Texas at Houston. That's a good game. Houston's 2-4, but they actually been playing pretty tough. And like I said, they upset West Virginia last week. You got Virginia at North Carolina. Can Drake May keep up the Heisman talk? I mean, everybody's talking about him as a Heisman contender. I think he'll be a finalist. I don't think he's going to be at the top of the heap unless something significantly crazy happens. If some of the other guys that are in front of him have a game like Caleb Williams do this past week, his chances keep creeping up there. Just don't know if he's going to hit the top spot. Ole Miss at Auburn. We'll see if the mad scientist Lane Kiffin can put something on Auburn. I'm kind of disappointed because they were one of my picks this past week and they just completely let me down. So, good job, Auburn. You suck. But again, Jordan-Hare Stadium is always very, very difficult to play in, particularly if you're visiting an SEC team. It's just tough to play at. You've got App State at Old Dominion. I think that game is going to be good. It's going to be on the NFL Network. So if you don't have the NFL Network, you're probably not going to be able to watch it. But I think that'll be a good game. ODU is very solid. App State has been up and down all season, but every game that they played has been close. So it'll be definitely one that's worth watching. You got Army and LSU kicking at 7:30 on SEC Nation. Oof. I think the SEC Nation. Yeah, I think the SEC Nation is kind of the hint of where they think the game is going to go. Because if they thought it was going to be more competitive, I think it would have been on broadcast at least late, because everybody knows that Army fans watch Army football, and so I think that's an indication of where things are going. You got Michigan State and Michigan again. Usually a interesting game, but not so much anymore, particularly with all the off the field shenanigans that Michigan State has had. And Michigan State is just they're not good this season.
I hope it goes 5 quarters.
Nice. I hope it does not. So you've got the 8 o'clock kick is Utah at USC. Can Caleb Williams bounce back? And guess what? His arch nemesis, Cam Rising, is not supposed to play. I don't know if they're playing that close to the vest just to keep it keep.
Is that guy ever coming back? He hasn't taken a snap this season, right?
That injury?
Like he tore his ACL in the offseason. So I don't know if at this point, being 6 weeks in, Cam Rising may be like playing for a medical red shirt and hang out, and he'll be the 37-year-old quarterback. So he and Frank Harris will be playing again next season, just because they don't want to grow up. It's like there's a bag of pixie dust in the NC2A offices, and they just keep sprinkling it on these guys so they can stay in Neverland. I have no idea. So you got Arizona State at Washington. Like after that performance last week, that's their nightcap on FS1. After the performance that Michael Penix had last week, like I don't know what the parlay is for him. Expect like 3 touchdowns and 300 plus yards against the Arizona defense, if not more. That guy is good. Like after watching him, usually watching the highlights, you kind of, selective editing, it's a highlight reel, right? But after watching that Oregon game, that guy's every bit as much of the Heisman candidate as they've been talking about. And he can throw some good balls, man. He's throwing some back shoulder fades that were like pretty tremendous. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, we are going to pause. And, before we get into the games of the week, I know you guys got some stuff that you want to talk about. Let's just pause. We'll get into our weekly locks, and then we can talk about what other games you're watching.
Weekly locks.
Well, I went 0-1 last week. Just took one pick. I took App State to cover against Coastal. Coastal, in like the most mediocre year they've had in a couple of years, won their first game ever at App State. That was 0-1. So what can you do? Anyway, I'm taking Liberty minus 14.5 to cover. Well, tonight, as you're listening to this, tomorrow night, as we're recording it, versus MTSU. Like we said, that's another Tuesday night game. We've got James Madison minus 3.5 at Marshall. Air Force minus 11.5 at Navy. And it really, if you want to double that up, play the over 37.5 as well. Like, I understand that Navy is not going to score on that Air Force defense, but Air Force has put up like 7 yards per carry against everybody. It's crazy. And then, yeah, man, I'm tempted to take South Florida -2 at UConn. Like, the Huskies have had kind of a weird year like Army has, where they've got all this talent on the field and like a good O-line. You're watching them wondering how they keep losing these games, but they make all these crazy mistakes and they keep losing. But they finally got off the schneid. They beat freaking Rice. Rice is actually good this year. So this is liable to be a competitive game. Oh, by the way, South Florida is 3-4, so they need this game badly. So, I mean, I know South Florida UConn is not like going to set the college football world on fire, but this is an interesting game if you like the group of 5.
That's good. How about you, Joe? What are you watching?
Well, as far as what I'm watching, I'm definitely gonna be watching Michigan State. We can't beat them soundly enough to make me happy, and I'll be tuning into Penn State, Ohio State, because we're playing both those teams in a month. I went 2-2 last week. Mizzou came through and won outright against Kentucky as 4-point dogs. The Heels covered against Miami. Unfortunately, USC choked, and Louisville got throttled by a 1-win Pittsburgh team. If you can figure that out, you're smarter than I am. I'm taking 4 games this week. Going back to the well with Mizzou to cover 7.5 at home against a 2-4 South Carolina squad. I like that offense, and they're not playing in South Carolina. So, yeah, I'm taking them to cover there. I like Oklahoma to cover at home against a 3-3 Central Florida team. So cover 19. I'm sorry, cover 19 points. So UCF is not the UCF of back in the day, and this team's 3-3. So I definitely got Oklahoma covering that. I like Ole Miss to cover against a 3-3, cover 6.5 against a 3-3 Auburn team who just got beat by 30 by the team that Ole Miss beat. So I like them to cover 6.5 against Auburn. And then finally, I'm wrapping up with the most boring offense in college football, the 6-1 Iowa Hawkeyes, giving up 5 points at home to a Minnesota team who just got beat by 42 on their home field by Michigan. So Iowa's not
a whooping.
Michigan, but they are 6-1 and ranked, and they're at home against the Minnesota team. He was putrid.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts? Do you think Iowa's going to win the West, and it's just going to be another one of those kind of Big Ten seasons?
Oh man, if they do, they're going to have to take USC and Oregon and stick them on the other side and give Washington and UCLA to Michigan side, because they're going to have to put some power on that side, because they're the Big Ten games. It's like watching the old SEC West versus East when Bama was rolling, and you knew like, yeah, the title is going to be played between Bama and Auburn or Bama and LSU, not between Bama and Florida. It's the same thing. When Michigan and Ohio State play, that's the Big Ten title. And then there's a game the week after that for the team that won the B division. So they got to do something to get a little more equality as far as the heavyweights and the heavy hitters in the Big Ten, because I think they will win the Big Ten West, and they're going to get drugged by Ohio State or Michigan.
Yeah, I think that's the balance that has to change, and that's one of the good things coming out of conference realignment. Like, you can actually weight other parts of the divisions that are just like nobody cares. Like, nobody cares about the SEC West. You know what I mean? Like, but you throw Texas and Oklahoma in there, maybe we will if those guys are playing good football. But so I went 1-2 last week. Like, I should have taken UMass and PSU. That would have been an easy win. But again, I wasn't trying to, cherry pick. That was too easy. A hit on Notre Dame and USC. They went over. Both Miami and Auburn got smacked around. So this week, take the the over of 56 in the Utah USC game. I'm going back to the well on that. Till USC starts playing defense, like they're going to score a bunch of points. If you watch the 2 games last year with Utah, they scored 71 and 85 points respectively in those 2 contests. So they're definitely going to hit over 56. That's pretty easy. Take the over on the Penn State OSU game. I think both offenses are starting to click right now. Don't be surprised if it goes into overtime and the winner covering the difference, because I think it's like 3.5. But like, again, advantage Ohio State because it's at home in the shoe. If it was at Happy Valley, I would lean the other way, just because, not because I'm a fan of either team, but I'm just smart enough to know that Big Ten football, like whoever's at home has the advantage distinctively, particularly if you're playing in the Big House or the Horseshoe. I mean, those are very, very weighted. I think the only thing that would make a PSU a little bit more competitive in this contest is if it was at home in a whiteout, because I think that was the last time they actually beat the Buckeyes was in the whiteout at Happy Valley. But that I don't.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when was the last time Penn State got out from under Big Brother's little shadow there?
Yeah.
They've played season spoiler for Ohio State a couple times in the last 10 years, but it hasn't been very much. But they've won a couple of games that they were not picked to win against Ohio State. They were both in Happy Valley.
Yeah, but again, like the home team has the advantage. Like home field advantage, particularly in the Big Ten, is a thing, period. And then moving on, take OU to cover 19.5 against UCF. Again, didn't read anything that Joe put in there. I think that's going to happen. I think OU is rolling right now. I would be surprised if their quarterback doesn't put up, about 275 and 2 touches and run 1 in as well, because that guy's legit good, and everybody's watching him now for the Heisman. So if your coach is smart, when you got the hot hand, you got to play with it. And so I think they'll be good with that one. But yeah, it's been pretty crazy. So at the end of the picks, we are moving on to our bandwagon fantasy sports update. Like, it was crazy this weekend. Again, I got screwed by West Virginia and Colorado. Man, I was like, there's no way that Colorado is going to lose to Stanford. Boy, did that prove me wrong, right? And then West Virginia, that game could have went either way. But I am Matt's on top with 82 points. Dano's in second with 78. I'm tied with him, but he has the edge by 1 of the away game wins. So we're in
He's been up by 6. We finally closed the gap a little bit. We're only down 4 points now.
Yeah. So he's just a bad weekend away from one of us jumping up on top. I really like the I'm actually a fan of the bandwagon fantasy sports. It's easily managed. And again, set your lineups before you get into the early games if you have one of those teams picked. But we are going to close out the show. Gentlemen, we are halfway through the college football season. Like, the regular season is halfway done, and I cannot believe how fast it has gone. I'm scratching my head as to where all the time went. It looks like there are some teams like pretenders and contenders. Like we've pretty much locked those in right now. We kind of see the teams that are trending up. We kind of see the teams that are trending down, and the teams that are probably not going to have very good of a season. Thanks for sticking with us to this point. If you're a fan of Army football or the rest of college football, please check out the show, because it's we spend a lot of time building this thing up. Sign out for the mailing list. We send out 1 email a week with all of our content. So if you are interested, go to askforfootball.com/subscribe. Or if you really like the content that we're putting out, sign up for our Patreon. Either way, we're going to keep making them if you keep listening. Again, it's been a crazy season so far. We're going to see some more top 25 upsets this week. And I'm gearing up for this week. And hopefully, Army can make it out of LSU without too many significant casualties. That's going to be a pretty tough game. Like, if there's one game where Brian Kelly could have probably said, yeah, we're going to beat them up, like, that's probably fair. I mean, I don't think that anybody would be like, okay, yeah, like, LSU beating up on Army, a SEC team beating up on, small independent, probably makes sense. But I think so far this season, it's been pretty interesting. We'll see what happens. I think the fallout of conference realignment is going to be heavy. I mean, when you look at the Pac-12, the Pac-12 is having its probably the best season that it has had in the last decade.
I know. It's amazing.
Right.
It's amazing.
Right before the entire conference dissolves. And that just goes to show you how crazy college football is, because it's like, hey, look, if you would have told me 2 years ago that, like, all these realignments are going to happen, the playoff is going to get bigger. Like, I think everybody wanted the playoff to get bigger. I don't think anybody saw the conference realignment coming the way that it did. But now that it's happening in real time, it's like, man, who's going to come out on top? I think the 8-team playoff is going to be huge. I personally would like to see, you know, 1 or 2 less cupcake games, go to a 8-team conference schedule, and then you just balance that out over time and let the conferences manage that part and play 10 games. So you have 2 out of conference games, 8 teams, 8-team games in the season, conference championship, and then you go to the playoff. Again, that's my personal opinion because, you know, one of the chief complaints that NFL players have is the seasons are too long. Now, if you're an NIL guy like Frank Harris, you probably don't care how long the season is because you're still collecting a check. But if you are actually in college to try and get a degree, you want the season to be over as quickly as possible so you can move on to your next thing. Either way, we're going to wrap this up. This has been 2 O's and an NCO. I am Rob, the Playground Legend. We got Dano Ikebesa calling to you out of Coastal Carolina. Geez, he watched Coastal Carolina last week. He's at Coastal Connecticut. And Trigger Joe out of the home of the Big House. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Beat LSU.
Thanks for listening to the Ask for Football College Football Roundtable. Tune in next week as the AFF team brings you more hot takes and college football analysis. We'd like to thank our sponsor, BuyerBarn.com. BuyerBarn.com is the world's first platform to perform online auctions and sales for farm animals. BuyerBarn.com is dedicated to helping small farmers in America and are extending a special discount to military veterans who want to help in the revolution of the family farm. Go to BuyerBarn.com/military. That's BuyerBarn.com, BYREBARN.com to learn more and to get started, or email them at info@BuyerBarn.com. Thanks again for listening to Ask for Football College Football Roundtable, and as always, beat Navy.